BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of this government before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today, we are pleased to have as our guest Dr. William Irwin. Dr. Irwin is a Herve A. LeBanc Distinguished Service Professor and Chair of Philosophy at King's College. He is the author of many books. However, Free Dakota, the book that we'll be discussing today, is his first novel. This is a book that you will thoroughly enjoy as you are being entertained while being educated on the true principles of libertarianism and freedom. Listen in and call in with your questions and comments. I'd like you to dial 646-652-4620. I'll give that again, 646-652-4620. If you want to become part of our conversation, part of our show, ask a question or make a comment, just press the one button so we know that you want to break in. We have a board with the numbers lit up. Those that have the little one button pressed, we know you want to interrupt us or join the conversation. But we look forward to hearing from you. All right, Dr. Irwin, welcome to Liberty Talk Radio.
Thank you for having me, Joe. Please call me Bill.
Okay, Bill, thank you so much. Now, my experience, and tell me if I'm just being naive, but my experience with professors in colleges, and I've known a few that are very good friends of mine, they seem to be loners. I mean, they're the only libertarians in the group. The college that you're at, is it different than some of the other the experience that some of my friends have received who have who've done very, very well? In fact, a friend of mine, he was approaching his 10th year at a college. He was nominated that year as the best professor, and they wouldn't allow him to have tenure because they didn't like his libertarian leanings. And I don't know if that's pervasive or maybe that's a isolated case.
No, I think unfortunately that's pretty pervasive. I sort of stumbled into libertarianism. I wasn't until well into my 30s and after tenure before I started caring about politics or political philosophy. I just always wanted to be left alone. Yeah, I'm a loner. Leave me alonist. And it wasn't until I was a little older and paying more attention to the larger society that I realized I wasn't being left alone in quite the way I wanted. So, libertarians are tolerated more than conservatives. Conservatives are thought to be just stupid and or evil. And libertarians, we're tolerated a little bit more in the academy as sort of misguided oddballs. So not quite as bad as being a conservative. You really have to be in the closet about that.
I assume that in the university setting, you're just not as dangerous because you're an odd person and there's not many of you, and we can tolerate you because you're not that popular. No one really understands you. You probably have no idea what you're talking about anyway, so we'll let you be. But conservatives have a bigger following, and they pose more of a risk, I guess, to the liberal establishment. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a fair enough read on it, I think, Joe.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what possessed you? By the way, I want to show the book. Hey, show the book. There we go. Here's the book, Free Dakota. You will love this book because it's not only captivating, the characters are lifelike. I just loved all the characters in the book. It's an easy read, but the principles that are discussed in regular conversations at the coffee shop there and exemplify how people are thinking and why they want a free Dakota. So my question to you is, what possessed you to write this book?
Well, thanks, Joe. I really appreciate all those kind words about it. I've always wanted to write a novel, and it strikes me that libertarian ideas need to be gotten out there in stories. We have the novels of Ayn Rand, which are terrific. Atlas Shrugged runs nearly 1,000 pages, though. This is 200 pages. Right. And it's set in contemporary times. And it, as you suggest, makes the case for libertarian principles in a kind of down-home setting, in a diner in North Dakota.
Yeah. Now, I have to ask you, this question is so odd, I don't know how to ask it. Was this book written by one of the characters? Was he the person really, indirectly writing this book as a novel? And so I'm reading a novel about a person writing about a novel? Did I get that right at the end, or did I miss it?
No, you got that right at the end.
Oh, my...
The suggestion is that one of the characters, we won't say who it is for those hopefully who will read the book, is actually the narrator of the novel, but you didn't realize it until probably the last page.
That's right, the last page. And I was a very poor student. If I was your student, you would have thrown me out of class, but I was a very poor student, and I don't consider myself to be intellectually very good. But so when I read that, I said, I have to be wrong because I can't possibly be smart enough to uncover that. But I'm glad to see that, at the young age of 73, I'm finally waking up. My brain is starting to work. That's terrific, Oh,
I'm glad you caught that. I'm not sure everybody who reads it would get that. Yeah. So thanks for picking up on that, Joe.
Well, I think the reason why I caught on to it is because I was at the dog park at the time, and I didn't care what the dogs did. I was concentrating on the book. All right. Now, after, I guess, reading this book, you had to be inspired because you are somewhat concerned, all right, or maybe even troubled, maybe a harsh word, but maybe even troubled, as I am. And so that had to have some motivation. There's part of your motivation writing a book. Where do you think we are today as a society? Do you see these, I hate using the words libertarian principles because, here in Oklahoma, there's so many people that are so dumb, it's unbelievable. I mean, like in every state. I always say that people say, are you a libertarian? I hate to say yes because here in Oklahoma, they go, oh, you got to be one of them liberal, gay guys that like to dance around in their underwear. They have no concept, really no concept. When I was at 1170 KFAQ, I was on commercial television for a while, radio rather. And I used to say that all the time. I said, don't ask me if I'm a libertarian because you have no idea what you're talking about. This is my concern, is that people don't understand. And if I watch television and listen to the debates, for example, which I really never do, I listen for about 30 seconds and then I have to go out and slit my wrist. They break every single precept of the Constitution, not only in the answers, but even in the questions themselves. So I find ourselves, America, to be a totally lost country. Am I too extreme?
Well, no, I don't think so, Joe. I mean, I think we can reveal a little bit of the book to the audience that it's motivated by a secession movement. And really it's making the case in the book that maybe the country's broken to the point where there are irreconcilable differences and a divorce is called for. And it reflects on the way in which the country really began with a divorce. I mean, the Revolutionary War wasn't so much a revolution like you saw in the French Revolution as it was a civil war of sorts, right? In which we seceded from our home nation. And although we would like to avoid any divorce in a marriage or certainly in the country, it has to be on the table. It has to be a consideration. And the states have to have their autonomy as the Constitution grants it to them in order to have experiments in democracy and really see what works with the grip and grasp of the federal government the way it is. There's no room for states to experiment really and do their own thing, and to the point where you may wonder, is it time to part company? And we do see secession movements in Texas and California and Vermont and Alaska and New Hampshire. None coming close to actuality, but it's being talked about in a way it hasn't in a long time. I mean, secession is sort of a dirty word because it's so closely associated with the South and slavery, but it really doesn't need to be. It can certainly be a peaceful separation between political entities.
One of the saving grace about Oklahoma is that we're attached to Texas. We bought to Texas because I used to live in Texas, and I remember when I first moved from New York City. Now I'm a street kid from Harlem, sang doo-wop back in the 50s. And so you got to say this is a giant leap going from an atmosphere or a neighborhood like that and moving down to Texas. I mean, talking about a change in venue, but. When I moved down there and I went to the bank to get a mortgage for the home, for the house I wanted to buy, the bank, all the gals in this particular bank were wearing, they were like cheerleading outfits, I think they're all gorgeous, by the way, and they were made up of the Texas flag, and they were at that time. This is a long time ago. There were Texas flags flying over. You never saw an American flag. You saw Texas flags flying everywhere. And I thought that was so cool. And I said, I tell my wife all the time, and she's from Oklahoma. And I said, if we ever, Texas ever secedes from the Union, we're moving.
Yeah, it would have to be better, right? I mean,
have to be better.
In my novel, it's North Dakota that goes, but Texas would certainly be better weather. It sure better of lots of things.
Yeah. Well, we lived in Houston, and it was hot, humid all the time, And anyway, now, did the anti-federalists have it right?
Well, I think so. From the beginning, we've seen the struggle in this country, and there was. The idea that there was a rat to be smelled in Philadelphia with the Constitution, and that perhaps even the Constitution, as incredible a document it is, didn't preserve states' rights to the extent that it should have. We really don't get that fully articulated until the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments.
Yeah. Now, originally the intent of the Federalist Papers. The government was just to have authority over national security. I just can't remember all. There was about 4 or 5 basic principles of areas that the government was responsible for. In the event of national emergency, they can participate. But everything else was left up to the states. But over time, the states abdicated all of their responsibilities to the federal government, I guess starting all the way back from, Woodrow Wilson on. Do I have that about right?
I think that's right. I mean, there's the idea of enumerated powers granted to the federal government in the Constitution, and the presumption from the framers is that anything not enumerated falls to the domain of the states. And I'm not sure the states so much abdicated control as had it taken from them, extorted from them in many cases by the federal government. Yeah. We see that in just gigantic form in our current regulatory state.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, you must feel similar to the way I feel when you get a Bernie Sanders who's a devout socialist, wants to basically have a socialist, fascist type of government, and you have a large large segment of society cheering for him, saying this is the best thing since sliced bread. This has got to make you feel very uncomfortable. It made me sick almost, when I heard this guy.
Well, yeah. I certainly don't agree with his politics, though I always found him likable as a guy, as just a fellow out there speaking his mind. He seems sincere, seems authentic. Yeah. I don't think that what he has in mind is good or right or would work. But I actually suggested in a newspaper article that I wrote that now that he had lost the Democratic nomination, he could still become president of Vermont. Let Vermont secede. They actually have a secession movement in Vermont called the Second Vermont Republic.
Oh, that's right.
That shows up in my book. Let Vermont go. Let them be like a little European nation. Let them experiment, see if it works. Yeah. Right next door in New Hampshire, there's also a kind of a secession movement, smaller than the one in Vermont, called the New Hampshire Foundation for Independence. Let them secede as well, and put to work a libertarian state and see which does better, right next to one another there. in New England.
Yeah, a twist in your book is from the way I was reading it, when the federal government brought in all the troops to settle there for, I guess, 6 months or whatever the period had to be, so that you can have voting rights in that state. So you had to be stationed there for, I think, 6 months, was it, or something like that?
Actually, one of the anomalies of North Dakota is that you can vote as a citizen in the state right away. So that was one of the in the novel, one of the reasons troops could go to North Dakota and be ready to vote right away.
Okay, and it was surprising that, and it surprised everyone. It surprised the heck out of me that so many of the troops had voted for the secession unit and not against it. And of course, then it turned out the results turned out very different than you would have expected.
Well, I mean, if you look at active polling among the military, Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, is outpolling Trump and Clinton. I think, and I actually had a couple of active military consult with me on the book, Active Military of Libertarian Leaning. So the idea that the military wouldn't like to be drawn into a political conflict within the United States itself, I think there's actually a good reason to think that they would shy away from being compelled to vote in one direction or the other.
Yeah. Well, you say that Gary Johnson is outpolling in what, in North Dakota? Are you talking about, or?
No, among military.
Oh, among military. I see.
Military.
Now that is surprising. I know they were the military was very much for Ron Paul, and they kept that hush hush. But nearly every military person was voting for Ron Paul, but they never let that out during that, when Ron Paul ran the last presidential election. And it was a shame. I recall, it may have been New Hampshire or Vermont, I don't recall, where there was 2 rallies. There was a rally by, who was it? I think Romney and Ron Paul. And Ron Paul had like 7,000 people show up, and Romney had just a few hundred people show up. The very next day when there was the election, Romney had thousands of votes, and Ron Paul only had a few hundred votes. And I thought to myself, who would go out brave, the elements, go to a rally, for your candidate, and then the next day not vote? I mean, it's totally incongruous. It was illogical, and yet that's the way it turned out. And I was very suspicious of even the count of the vote as well.
Yeah, I mean, the math on that doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless the people at the rally had come from great distances, or I have no idea how to explain that.
Yeah. Now, I know libertarian is getting a little bit, wider acceptance. And we have a call. Which line? We have a call on line 1. Before I continue my diatribe, let's take this call. Okay, Bill?
Great.
Caller, yep. You're on the line. You have line 1. You're on the air. Your question or comment, please.
Hi, Joe. Are you there? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're on the air. Thank you for calling. Your first name, please.
Thank you.
Yes, your question.
My name is Patty.
Patty. Okay, Patty, your question.
Hi.
Your question or comment, please.
Yes. I have a comment. I'd like to tell Dr. Irwin about your reading his book. I'm familiar with the dog park that you go to, and while the rest of us are there watching our dogs to make sure they don't leave some kind of special gift, you're supposed to watch your dogs, Joe. You're over there reading the book. So I haven't read it yet, but it sounds very fascinating. But anyway, I want you to watch your manners at the park. As for Dr. Irwin, you mentioned something that just hit the nail on the head for me, talking about the Civil War. To me, it feels like we have a civil war going on in Congress, and it's been that way and has gotten worse really in the last 20 years or more. It just seems we can't get anything done because we have Republicans knocking heads with the Democrats, and so the political battle is just much more ferocious because we've got to be sure we pick whatever side we like. And that's why I'm leaning that I like the Libertarian Party. I think we need to break up this war. Does your book cover anything? I'm sorry, I'm going to read it. I haven't read it yet, but do you have any comments on that? Do you see that same thing that I'm seeing?
Yeah, thank you, Patty. Did I get the name right? Yeah, Patty, thank you for your question. I think that's an interesting way to think about it. We're in kind of not an active guns and bullets civil war, but there's kind of a cold civil war going on. And I think you're right that Congress is largely gridlocked. Although from my perspective, that's not an altogether bad thing, because most of what both the Republicans and Democrats would like to do is oftentimes not what I'd like to see them do, and not in the spirit of the Constitution, and not in the spirit of liberty. Yeah, I mean, I had high hopes that Gary Johnson had some kind of possibility and could be a real honest broker between the two sides. Some of the scenarios that have been floated and seem very unlikely at this point, but if he had the chance of winning his home state of New Mexico, which it doesn't look like he'll even do that, and Utah, and perhaps one or two other states, it looked at one point that no one would get the needed 270 electoral votes, and the election could go to Congress, and then Congress could potentially, instead of giving it to either of the top two, Trump or Clinton, could kind of start something new and give it to Johnson as the Libertarian. And he and his running mate Bill Weld both seem quite open to working with both sides of the aisle and getting things done in a way that would be more in the spirit of liberty. But that doesn't seem a likely outcome in this election cycle, unfortunately.
Right. Thank you for answering my question.
Okay, Patty, thank you for calling Liberty Talk Radio and listening to us. Appreciate it very much. You know, I get a little exasperated with politicians who consider themselves libertarian, because they talk the libertarian line, but when they are confronted with a particular issue, they sort of mutilate the principle of freedom to fit the situation. And I'll give you an example. Gary Johnson was asked, do you believe that a merchant has the right to refuse to serve somebody for being gay, for example? I think the example was being gay. And he says, no, that should not be permitted. And I about lost my teeth on that one. It seems that they say they're libertarian, but they truly do not understand the principle of freedom. If I was Gary Johnson, I would have said, well, let's turn that around. Let's assume a minority, a gay person. Pick whatever group you want. It's immaterial. And there are two bakeries. One bakery is by a guy that's I associate with, and the other one is guy that's not. You know, whether it be gay, black, Hispanic, I don't pick it out, whatever it is. And I decide, well, since I'm Italian and that guy's Italian, I'm going to buy cake from him. Shouldn't I be punished for that? I mean, they don't take any situation and analyze and say, well, from a free point of view, we all do that. We all have certain prejudices that we hold dearly, although we're not even conscious of it, you know. But as soon as we make these prejudices public, then the government has to step in and ensure that we don't behave that way. And Gary Johnson can't answer those questions. That's what bothers me about him.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. And the problem is that he's first a politician and secondly, a libertarian. I mean, he's barely a libertarian, right? He was a Republican governor, and he's certainly libertarian leaning and is the most libertarian candidate we've seen, certainly in reaching the level that he has, but he's not really libertarian. And although he's not a politician to the awful extent that most are, he's a politician, and he certainly didn't take the right line on that question. And it's easy to point out, particularly in this day and age, that there's a market solution to prejudice and discrimination. Somebody who is going to discriminate against whatever group is going to be labeled prejudiced, bigoted, whatever the case may be, and business will suffer as a result. There's a market solution to the problem. There doesn't need to be a government solution.
You know, I would never go into, and I have businesses, and I would never go into business saying, I'm going to go in business so I don't sell to professors at colleges. I mean, I would not do that. I mean, why cut? Why? I know they can't afford it, but that's another story. But why cut my own throat? I mean, I want to find out how I can sucker the professors at colleges to buy more than they can afford. I mean, I don't care. I mean, I love money. I mean, and every person, of course, is you're measured by your success in business, and success is measured by the income that you make on it. Why someone would go in business and say, well, I'm going to open this store, whether it be a bakery, or otherwise they say, well, but I'm not going to serve Hispanics, gays, whatever the case may be. That's insane. No one would do that. Now, does it happen on occasion? Yeah. But is it a nationwide, national issue? Of course not. It'd be insane. And first of all, what are you going to do? Ask everyone to walk out and say, by the way, before I sell you this, whatever you're selling, I need to know your religious leaning. I need to know if you're divorced. I want to know if you're gay. We don't do that. So how do we know who we're serving in the first place? Person comes in, buys something, and leaves. This drives me nuts. What really bothers me is, why doesn't someone sit down with a Gary Johnson and say, look, you know, you're a little shy on understanding the principle of liberty. Let me give you 3 or 4 scenarios, and just to make you think, and then I want you to ask me questions and debate this with me. So when you're asked questions, you'll have a better understanding. Or give them a book to read. You know, from the Future of Freedom Foundation, the Foundation of Economic Education, you know, all these other organizations. 2 or 3 articles and these guys would be converted, but they don't do that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you're a little bit more forgiving than I am on this, actually, Joe. I don't doubt that Gary Johnson does understand things the way that you and I do. I just think when he's on camera and feels like he needs to make a quick point, he shies away from it. I mean, we see him on the drug issue as well. You know, he very much is in favor of marijuana legalization, and he's made arguments for legalization across the board. But now in the spotlight, he says, no, I'm only talking about marijuana. It's the politician's move. Yeah,
I see. Now, Bill, could you hold on for about 60 seconds for station identification? We'll be right back.
Certainly.
Okay, please. Folks, don't go away. This is Liberty Talk Radio. Our telephone number is 646-652-4620. Press the 1 button if you want to ask a question or make a comment. Please hold back. We'll be gone just for a few seconds for station identification. We'll be right back.
Listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com.
Ranch Acres Audiology is about caring, about getting the most out of life, about personal attention.
Sometimes helping someone with their hearing is really helping them with more than just hearing. That's the goal of my practice. That's what my goal has been for 20 years.
You're invited to attend our next free Lunch and Learn seminar. Call us today, 918-749-7711.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
I'm still with you, Joe. Thanks for your kind words. Oh, yeah, I get them all the time. Oh, all right, that's good. Oh, wow, that. Well, she's not Donald Trump. And although there are a lot of bad things that I could say, and you have to even, wow, she doesn't seem to be insane. I think we can say that. That's about it. Well, she's not a very nice person. We know that. She's very self-interested, very self-absorbed, false. But on the other hand, she's savvy, right? I guess that's good. I wouldn't mind having her. Well, I was going to say as a business partner, but I guess I would, because we'd end up getting indicted. And I'm the only one who would get in trouble.
That's right. You'll get indicted, not her.
So I don't know. You really got me on that one, Joe. I'm not sure what to say.
Well, it just absolutely mystifies me, the fact that so many people can show up at her rallies and cheer her on. She says absolutely nothing. She has a horrible track record in everything that she's done in and out of government. And is America become that obedient to the elite that we are becoming like a third world nation where no matter what the king or queen says, it becomes gospel?
I don't know. I mean, there is a deficit of enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton when you compare it in particular to Bernie Sanders, who she defeated. But there's no way that guy should have had any chance that he actually did have against her. And he had the bigger rallies and certainly the more enthusiasm. So, I mean, it's not just a choice of evils that we find ourselves facing here, but a choice of, well, in her case, she's just got, as you say, nothing really positive to offer. It's a shame.
Yeah. Well, hold on a second, please. Can you get me? Okay. All right. I'm awfully sorry. We had a little. There I am. Okay. A little technical difficulty. Bill, it sort of surprises me that when they interviewed college students. Oh, by the way, we have a caller on line one. Oh, we don't have a call. I blew that one. Okay, sorry about that caller. We had another caller, but that wanted to make a comment, but they left us. I'm sorry, but we are talking about college students. We're addressing college students who listen to the likes of a Bernie Sanders, who's obviously talking socialism, and it doesn't seem like that a light bulb is going on in anyone's head saying, "Hey, this is trouble." I mean, this is how countries dissolve, basically, in their own, own bureaucracy. And there are, a couple of hundred examples around the world, and they are enthusiastic. What are we teaching in our schools that someone would talk socialism and everyone would cheer? Where are our teachers? Where's our school system? Where are the parents of these kids? I mean, where's anybody? It looks like these kids came from another planet, got planted here, heard someone say, "Hey, free school for everyone, free this, free that," and everyone cheered.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the world? Did the rest of the world go to sleep while I was blasting on the radio?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we have a very short memory for history, right? I mean, it's a short lesson about the 20th century and the failures of socialism and communism. And of course, you can point out the corrupt people involved and the ways in which the systems weren't pure. And so people make their excuses along those lines. But it just sounds pretty good when you tell people that they can get stuff for free. And if they're pushed to think about it at all, it seems to be, well, yeah, it'll have to come from somewhere, I guess, from the rich people, but they can afford it. And that's the end of the thinking on it, as if taking from the wealthy isn't going to have any further effects in terms of their ability to hire, invest, and keep the economic system going. The thinking just stops at that, right? That the money comes from somewhere, the wealthy, but they can afford it. It's as if, well, they have all of their money under their mattress, and it's not actually already out there in circulation and being put to good use to create jobs, etc. There's just a basic economics illiteracy. I mean, you see it with the minimum wage as well, right? As if you can raise the price on something, the cost of labor, and not diminish the demand for it. I mean, it's just first day of economics.
Yeah. Well, I read an article recently from Singularity University. Are you familiar with them?
No, I'm not.
Well, fascinating. It talked about technology and where they are projecting technology will lead us. It is the most profound article that I've ever read. It talks about the exponential changes that are occurring. You know, back 30 years ago, you know, we went from 8K memory to 16K, and that took, you know, a year or two, you know, and that was phenomenal. I mean, 16K of memory. What are you going to do with all that memory? And today, in months, we go from gigabytes to terabytes, and now we're going to quadribytes or whatever it's called, and it's compressing, and it's increasing exponentially faster on each step. And they take this the technological revolution that we're going through, and they apply it to all of industry, you know, Uber cars, self-driving cars, etc. And the number of jobs that will be lost, the skills that will be needed. It seems that the people are not going in that direction, but technology is. What's going to happen when an employer has an option between hiring people at $20 or $30, because it costs you $20 an hour to have an employee when you get through the Obama. I know I have a business. Before you get through all the unemployment insurance, the you name it, you know, the Obamacare stuff and whatever, you get through all of that. No one works for $7.50 or $10 an hour. It costs you for $20 an hour when you have the vacations and all that. What employer is going to take somebody on, you know, when they can get a machine to do the work more reliably, not work 8 hours a day, work 24 hours a day, you know, never ask for vacation. All you've got to do is oil it once in a while, and most importantly, as Peter Schiff would say, and they never sue you. You know,
well, that's right. I mean, look at the fast food workers in particular
Yeah.
who want $15 an hour. Well, they're going to be replaced by kiosks in the McDonald's where I order myself and I swipe my own credit card and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I went to a McDonald's of this, and this was not recent. This was a couple of years ago, and I said, could you put ketchup instead of mustard on that? And the gal looked at me with a frightened look, like I asked her to unravel some quadratic equation, you know? And I said, what's the problem? And she couldn't speak. She didn't know what to do. She was absolutely frozen. And I thought to myself, if I was at a kiosk, it'd say, you want mustard or ketchup? And I press the button and it's done, you know? And I said, of what value did this poor gal, who obviously had no education or very little education whatsoever, lucky to have a job, and she can't even do the simplest task. Why would employers go that route? But then it begs the question, what happens to society? Do we have riots in the streets because no one's working and there ain't no more money, from the government, because the government is absolutely broke, with something like $130 trillion conservatively in debt at this point in time. What's going to happen to society?
Well, I mean, that's just it. We buy off bad behavior with the welfare state, and when we run out of other people's money to fund the buyout of bad behavior, sure, it's possible that we see riots as we did in Greece and countries like that. And really, we just have such an inversion of who we owe a kind of a debt of gratitude for. We owe it to the people who produce, the entrepreneurs who take risks and lose their money in trying businesses and try again and then ultimately succeed. I mean, the poor girl who you described working in the McDonald's, I mean, she's not making a lot of money, but she's working in an air-conditioned in the summer and heated in the winter, clean, well-lit place. I mean, you compare that to the kind of labor just a couple of generations ago that somebody would have to do to earn even what is the minimum wage. And things have gotten a lot better. And really, that's one of the things that we don't focus on enough, just how much better and easier life has gotten in the past 100 years. We're 8 times wealthier, and that's, after adjusting for inflation and everything else. And even the average person alive in America today has so much available to him or her that a Rockefeller or a Carnegie didn't have 100 years ago. And trickle down is not a great metaphor or way of depicting it, but there is a kind of, you might say, spillover, so that things get cheaper, better, faster. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody, what were luxury items just a couple of generations ago? Air conditioning, refrigeration, television, all of these things everybody has. And that line of progress is very likely to continue as long as we don't foul it up too badly.
Yeah. You get the likes of a Mark Faber, Jim Rogers, Jim Rickards, formerly with long-term capital management, that went under and almost took the whole world economy with it. He was the attorney for them at the time back in 1998. You get Peter Schiff. You get I can name them. I can name dozens of them. I won't bore you with all the names. And most of these people have been on all of them have been on my program, but they all say the ball game is over. We've reached a point. We've saturated the market with money. We're out. We're too highly indebted. The consumer is highly indebted. The states are highly indebted. Municipalities are highly indebted. And there may be possibly at the end of this month a meeting, I believe, with the IMF that may alter our position as the world's reserve, our currency as the world's reserve currency, which may be doomed for us, spell doomed for us. I mean, if this, we can't go on. Obviously, it can't continue. There's always a breaking point. Mother Nature gets to a point where she says, I had enough, it's all over. And you can't fight that, it's over, How do you see our near future?
Well, it doesn't look good for the reasons that you enumerate, Joe. I mean, the country's $20 trillion in debt, with a revenue stream of about $3 trillion a year in burdensome taxes. That's 6 or 7 times the revenue stream is what we owe. Imagine owing 6 or 7 times your yearly income as an individual. That's the kind of debt you never actually get out of unless there's some terrific windfall, and there's no real reason to think that that's coming. So it's the conceit of the novel that people want out. They want to start over again. And North Dakota is not a particularly desirable location, as you and I were joking, right? It's not Southern California or something like that. Just give us North Dakota and let us try something different on our own, is the idea. And the novel plays with a lot of allusions to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, the diner where the conversations all take place is in a town called Axton, which is named after the character Hugh Axton in Atlas Shrugged. And Atlas Shrugged inspires a lot of people with the idea that, the producers are taken for granted, and what if they were to go on strike? And people, talk about that as going galt. The new way of going galt that I'm suggesting, at least for consideration in the novel, is secede, leave, right? We don't need to have New York or California or, even Texas. They may not give us that. Give us North Dakota, right? It's one of the least populous states in the Union, only 700,000 people living there right now. Let us have it. Let us try something new. And we'll even pay some exit tax on the way out if you need that. Whatever it takes, but let's try something new.
Yeah, when Obama had mentioned that, I didn't build my business. I didn't do this.
Right.
I want this. I don't want to say the word, but I don't this guy, to tell me that I suffered for 10 years, nearly starved to death, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years to become the only survivor in that business in the state of Oklahoma, and now I have the largest occupational health testing company. That did not come free. That came through, a tremendous burden on myself, my family, and everyone around us. It was just a burden for everyone. But we survived in the worst of times. I sleeping on the road. At 4 o'clock in the morning, getting up on a road that I had no idea where I was to get to a particular town to find a factory to do work all day long and then drive home late in the middle of the night. I know who did. If I didn't do that, who did it? Who was driving at the time?
Joe, you didn't build that road. You didn't build that.
And it gets me so angry because I've been there. I've been on both sides of the fence. Now I'm doing pretty well, but I worked for it. No one gave it to me. I worked for it, and I'm 73. I still work. I don't want to stop.
The conceit coming from Obama is that, the government built the roads, the government educated the employees that you employ, as if nobody else could do that, as if there would be no roads if the government didn't build them, as if there'd be no education if the government didn't monopolize it. And I think he sincerely believes that, but it's foolishness.
Yeah. I know someone, I will not mention the person's name, that was in the same class as Barack Obama. And this guy's a pretty well-known person, by the way, and I got to know him pretty well also. I haven't seen him in years, though. But I had to ask him one time a few years ago, and he said, it's funny. He said, and this guy is a very popular guy, gets to know everyone. He walks in a room, he introduces himself to everyone. He's a multimillionaire. He lives in Vegas. And he says, it's amazing. He says, I knew everyone in my class. I don't remember him. No, I'm serious. I'm being saying, now he could be mistaken, And he said, so it really bothered me that I was supposedly in his class and I don't remember him. I remember everyone in my class. He said, Joe, you know me. I know everyone. And he said, you're right. You're the type of guy. He walks in a room, everyone knows him. He knows everyone. He does it. That's the way he is. Yeah. And he's noted for that. Pretty well-known person. And he says, so I decided to call a few of my classmates. They don't remember him either.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? It could be mistaken. Everyone could be mistaken. I'm not saying this is casting. And that just that whole arena talking about the Manchurian Candidate, all this bothers me. None of it seems right to me. Well, we only have a couple of more minutes to go, but I'd like to leave the last 5 minutes for you to blast diatribe or say whatever you want to say, or tell me how wonderful I am. I don't care what you say.
It is wonderful to connect with you, Joe. I love your voice. I'm from Yonkers, New York, so not too far from where you grew up in Harlem. It's good to connect with the New Yorker. We're both living in exile. I live in Pennsylvania, and the joke about Pennsylvania is that there are 3 parts: Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Alabama. And I live in the Alabama part of Pennsylvania, known as Pennsyltucky otherwise. So it's good to connect with another New Yorker in exile. But I really appreciate the chance to talk with you and to tell people about Free Dakota. There's more and more written on libertarianism and liberty issues, which is great. But the reason for Free Dakota is to tell a story. I think stories really carry a message in a way in which dry philosophy or newspaper articles or editorials just don't. So anybody who does pick up the book and reads it, I love to hear from readers. My email address is right in the book itself, and you can find me easily enough on the web, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and love to connect with people who are interested in liberty issues, and certainly always interested to hear positive or negative responses to the book if anybody picks it up.
Okay, Bill, I tell you, you've been an absolutely delightful guest. I hope you will accept that invitation to return at a later date. And what I will do is I actually send you a picture of myself so you don't forget me, okay? It'll take a different form than it won't be framed, but when you get it, you'll understand what I mean. Thank you so much for being on Liberty Talk Radio. And folks, here's the book. Oh, by the way, Bill, this book is available where?
Well, Amazon.com is probably the easiest place for people to get it. Through some booksellers as well, certainly BarnesandNoble.com, and perhaps your local bookstore if they're a really good bookstore.
Okay, great, folks. Buy the book, Free Dakota. If you don't, I know who you are. I'm going to come get you, okay? Bill, thank you very much for being on our show.
Thank you, Joe.
Right, thank you. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberty to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay waved, stay tuned. Thank you.
To have it up here for one sentence.
What is that?
It means they couldn't hear you for like a line.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
I had to bring that back up, but
all
other than that, it went fine.
Yeah, I think you enjoy the show, don't you?
Yeah.
What'd you think of the program?
I like it. I want to figure out the split screen thing. I screwed it up when we went to break. I want to try to figure that out because I liked just me. You can take it or leave it. I liked watching you guys bounce back and forth.
Yeah, and I don't mind being split screen with him. I don't mind if he's talking and I'm there. Yeah. That's fine too. I mean, I have no problem with that. I mean, sometimes it's nice if I'm going to diatribe for a while that you know.
Right.
But I don't mind split screen at all. Okay,
right.
Herve, you understand that? I don't mind split screen at all.
Right. I just need to figure out how it works because I
all right,
mucked
now,
it up in the commercial break, so.
The call that we had that hung up, did they ever dial 1?
I didn't see one way or the other. It looked like